To understand the story of the Odyssey, you have to understand the concept of waiting. It is a story defined by the long, agonizing stretches of time between what people expect to happen and what actually occurs. We begin 10 years after the fall of Troy. The Great War is over, the heroes have returned home, or so it seems, but for Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, the homecoming is nowhere in sight. Instead of a triumphant return, we find him held captive on the island of Ogygia by the nymph Calypso, who has fallen in love with him. He is not a prisoner in a cell, but he is a prisoner of her desire, sitting on the shore and watching the sea, longing for a home that feels more like a dream than a reality. While he is stuck there, his kingdom is falling apart. A mob of insolent suitors has taken up residence in his palace. These men are not just guests, they are parasites. They are consuming Odysseus's wealth, eating his livestock, and pressuring his wife, Penelope, to choose a new husband so they can divide the estate. This brings us to the second major thread of the story, Telemachus, the son of Odysseus. He has grown up in the shadow of a ghost. He is a young man struggling with the weight of a father he barely remembers and a household that no longer respects his authority. But the goddess Athena, who has long been a protector of Odysseus, sees potential in the boy. She begins to nudge him, guiding him to grow from a passive, grieving youth into a man capable of taking his place. Under her influence, Telemachus leaves Ithaca to search for news of his father. He travels to Pylos and Sparta, where he meets old comrades of Odysseus like King Nestor and King Menelaus. These kings provide him with the first real hope. His father is alive, though he is far away and the gods are not making his path easy. While Telemachus is finding his footing, the gods are deciding Odysseus's fate. Zeus decrees that it is time for the wanderer to return, but the sea is not a welcoming place for Odysseus. He has spent years running from the wrath of Poseidon, the god of the sea, who was insulted by Odysseus during his earlier travels. After a harrowing journey and a shipwreck that leaves him with nothing but the clothes on his back, Odysseus washes up on the shores of the island of the Phaeacians. The Phaeacians are a legendary people, known for their skill in seafaring and their strict adherence to the laws of hospitality. After being rescued by Princess Nausicaa and brought before King Alcinous, Odysseus is treated with the utmost respect. It is during a grand, formal banquet at the palace that Odysseus finally reveals who he is. He doesn't just say his name, he tells his story. The middle of the epic is essentially Odysseus recounting his legendary trials to the Phaeacians, and this is where we see the true nature of the man. He tells them of the encounter with the Cyclops, Polyphemus. This is a turning point in his journey. Using his wits, Odysseus blinds the giant to escape the cave. But in a moment of fatal hubris, he cannot help but shout his real name as he sails away. He wants the glory of the victory, but in doing so, he gives Polyphemus the information needed to call upon his father, Poseidon, to curse Odysseus's journey. This single moment of pride ensures that Odysseus's homecoming will be a struggle of survival rather than a simple voyage. He tells of the enchantress Circe, who turned his men into swine, and the sirens, whose song was so beautiful it lured sailors to their deaths on the rocks. He describes the descent into the underworld, a terrifying journey where he had to consult the prophet Tiresias to learn how to get home. In that dark place, he confronts the ghosts of his past and the reality of death, gaining the spiritual perspective necessary to complete his journey. He also tells the story of his crew's ultimate downfall. They were men who survived the monsters and the magic, but they could not survive their own greed. They ate the cattle of the sun god, a final act of impiety that led to the destruction of every single one of them, leaving Odysseus entirely alone on the sea. As Odysseus finishes his tale, the Phaeacians, moved by his suffering, provide him with a ship and a safe passage back to Ithaca. But the homecoming is not a simple reunion. Athena, still acting as his architect, meets him as he approaches his shores. She knows that if he simply walks into his palace, he will be killed by the suitors. So, she uses her power of disguise. She transforms the king of Ithaca into a ragged, weathered beggar. This disguise is a crucial tool for testing the loyalty of those he left behind. Odysseus, disguised as a beggar, enters his own palace and is met with varying degrees of respect and contempt. He finds a loyal swineherd named Eumaeus, who treats the beggar with genuine kindness, proving that even in a house of thieves the old ways of hospitality endure. He eventually meets Telemachus, who has returned from his travels. The father and son, reunited in secret, begin to plot their revenge. The tension in the palace reaches a breaking point during a contest organized by Penelope. She is a woman of immense intelligence and strategic patience. For years, she has used a ruse involving a loom, claiming she would choose a husband once she finished weaving a shroud, only to undo her work every night. Now, she sets a final challenge to break the stalemate. Any man who can string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through the holes of 12 axes will be her husband. The suitors, arrogant and overconfident, fail one by one. They cannot even string the bow. Then, the beggar steps forward. He takes the bow, strings it with ease, and performs the feat perfectly. In that moment, the disguise is shed, and the king is revealed. What follows is a scene of intense, focused violence. Odysseus and Telemachus, joined by a few loyal servants, slaughter the suitors in the very hall where they had been consuming the estate's resources. It is a purging of the house, a violent restoration of the natural order. A battle is not over once the enemies are dead. Odysseus must still prove to Penelope that he is indeed her husband. She is not easily fooled. She has endured too much to be won by a man who simply looks like her husband. She tests him by asking to move their marriage bed, a bed that is built into the very foundations of the house and cannot be moved. Odysseus's knowledge of this secret detail confirms his identity. Their reunion is not just a romantic moment, but a confirmation that the social and domestic order of Ithaca has been restored. As the story closes, there is a threat of further bloodshed from the families of the slain suitors. But Athena intervenes one last time, bringing a divine peace to the land and ensuring that Odysseus can finally settle into his life as king. When we look back at the shape of this epic, several themes emerge that explain why it has endured for nearly 3,000 years. The first is the concept of xenia, or hospitality. In the world of the Odyssey, hospitality is more than just being polite. It is a sacred social contract. The suitors are not just villains because they are annoying. They are villains because they have violated the most fundamental law of their society. They have entered a house that is not theirs and consumed its offerings without permission or respect. Their destruction is presented as a form of divine justice. Then there is the theme of identity and disguise. Throughout the story, characters are constantly shifting their outward appearance to hide their true nature. Odysseus uses his wits and his disguises to survive, but these disguises also serve as a way to test the integrity of others. He has to find out who is still loyal to him before he can reclaim his throne. This suggests that a person's true identity isn't just about their name or their status, but about how they behave when they think no one is watching. We also see a constant interplay between divine justice and human agency. It is easy to look at Odysseus's journey and see it as a series of punishments handed down by the gods. But the story also places a heavy emphasis on the choices the characters make. Odysseus's pride leads to the curse of Poseidon. His crew's greed leads to their death. The gods may set the stage and provide the wind, but the characters are the ones who make the decisions that determine their fate. Finally, there is the role of storytelling itself. Odysseus's journey is not just a physical movement across the sea, it is a process of remembering. He has to recount his past, to face his history, and to tell his story to others in order to reclaim his place in the present. By telling his tale to the Phaeacians, he is reclaiming his identity as a king and a husband. He is moving from being a man lost in the sea to being a man with a home and a legacy. The Odyssey ends not with a battle, but with a restoration of peace. It is a story about the long road home, the difficulty of returning to who you were after a lifetime of change, and the enduring power of loyalty, intelligence, and the simple, sacred act of being a guest in another person's house.